Welcome to the System Design and Management webinar series. The System Design and Management program and the newly introduced sister program, Integrated Design and Management, are early to mid-career master's degree programs jointly offered by MIT School of Engineering and the MIT Sloan School of Management. The SDM and IDM programs integrate management, design, technology, and social sciences to address rapidly accelerating complexity and change in today's global markets. Graduates earn a Master of Science degree in Engineering and Management. The SDM program also offers a one-year certificate in Systems and Product Development. We're pleased to have Matt Kressy present today on Integrated Design for Product Success. Matt is the director of the newly established IDM Master's Degree track and currently teaches Product Design and Development classes at MIT and the Rhode Island School of Design. Matt has extensive expertise in globally distributed, interdisciplinary, design-driven product development. An entrepreneur and founder of DesignTurn, he has designed, invented, engineered, and manufactured more than 1,300 products for Fortune 500 clients and others, including Kronos, Mass General Hospital, APC, the U.S. Army, and Teradyne Corporation. Matt holds a BFA in Industrial Design from the Rhode Island School of Design. Matt will speak today on why product designs can succeed or fail. He'll provide a high-level overview of strengths and weaknesses in current popular designs, and then we'll discuss critical factors in design success. Matt will present for approximately 45 minutes, and then we'll open up the webinar for questions. Please use the chat feature on the webinar to ask questions, and we'll respond to as many as possible. Please join me in welcoming Matt for his talk today.
Thank you, Joan. That was a very nice introduction. And I look forward to sharing my feelings and thoughts and some of the things that I've learned about product design and development and reaching excellence when working with all kinds of disciplines all around the world. As Joan mentioned, I've just recently, as of June, been appointed as the director of a brand new track here at MIT called Integrated Design and Management. And we're extremely excited about this, and we'll talk a little bit about that in this presentation, but not a whole lot. Mostly we'll talk about what we can do as product developers to improve the products that we create. So I thought I'd begin by showing you some products that I really love. My slides aren't advancing for some reason. Well, there they go. Thank you, Eric. So on this first slide, and there's a method to the madness, so bear with me. In the upper left-hand corner, we have the Eames lounge chair. I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with that. We have a Bang & Olufsen, iPod player, and we also have a B&B Italia couch. These are all notable products because not only are they technically sound, and in some cases, like the Eames chair, were they innovators in the manufacturing process with that bent lamination that you see there, but they're also quite beautiful. And it's not always the case that products are technically sound, come in at a reasonable cost, and are beautiful. And that's one of the big things that we're trying to emphasize with our program here, is that we can have it all. And it's really just a matter of us making the choice to reach for it. I'm going to show you some more here in this next slide. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have the very famous Herman Miller Aeron chair. We have a Land Rover Defender 90, which is a particular favorite of mine. I'll explain that in a little bit. And then we have a Ferrari 458. One of the reasons that the Ferrari is here is that until recently, something as technologically advanced as this was probably not achievable. It's only because of our new tools and methods and fluid dynamics and FEA and methods like that that allow us to create a car that has a very low drag coefficient, has an amazing power-to-weight ratio, produces just the right amount of downforce, and can also, again, look absolutely beautiful. So major achievement there. Of course, the pricing on all of this stuff is not exactly cheap, but they're successful business models. And why is that? Well, you would argue that the value is there. And if the value is there, then usually you can find a market. And now on this last slide, it gets a little more down to earth, except for maybe the Tesla. But, you know, bicycle technology has just, you know, hit, it's probably leveling out now, but the efficiency of bikes, the styling of bikes with carbon fiber is just phenomenal now. They're incredibly efficient, incredibly light, and just a pleasure. I'm a cyclist, so that's why it's on there. And then, you know, we have other great things. You know, the Dyson vacuum really kind of made design or aesthetics a really big part of that appliance in that category. The Harman Kardon sound sticks. I have on there Buzz Lightyear from Pixar because, you know, that was a paradigm changer in the film industry, where all of a sudden we had this computer-generated character or characters, but again, they were beautiful or they were compelling emotionally. And this is something that is so important to successful products. We as a market, as a, you know, capitalist society, we look to purchase the products and the services and the experiences that move us. And as product designers and developers, I think we really need to put an emphasis on that as we move forward. Otherwise, we're just going to get beaten. The Tesla Model S there is, again, another kind of paradigm shift in the automotive market. And so I thought it deserved being there. So, you know, what we have here, basically, new technologies emerging from these new processes and new sensibilities. We have new business paradigms. I forgot to mention Airbnb. You know, that created a whole new business model that didn't exist before, and really it came out of the design process. We have great products emerging as well, and things are just getting better and better. And so we're going to try to answer this question: how is this accomplished, at least in a consistent way? And for the most part, it's by integrating what we've kind of seen as three key disciplines, and that is design, business, and engineering. And when those those disciplines overlap and work together in a very intimate way, the results are really wonderful and very compelling, like a lot of the products I just showed earlier. And by the way, in this presentation, or at least in this Venn diagram, the use of the word design is really kind of relating to industrial design, user experience design, user interface design, graphic design, architecture. So that, you know, design is a huge part of engineering, but in the case of this Venn diagram, it's being used to represent sort of the user experience disciplines. And what do those disciplines have to do? Well, design, their main responsibility is to make a product desirable. It's to make it something that you want to spend time with, that you want to touch, that you want to interface with and interact with, that you want to experience. If it's something that you don't want to experience, it just wasn't designed very well, and that can be from a variety of reasons. You had bad designers, or more likely, you had no designers. And in other situations, you have maybe a design team that's intact, but it's not given the emphasis it deserves on a given product. Business is responsible for, obviously, the viability of the company and the profitability. So they're always going to be concerned with how design impacts viability. And engineering is responsible for the feasibility of a company or a product. And all of these disciplines are just integral to the success of a product. And when they work together, you just have phenomenal results. So let's just look at a paradigm changer. You'll notice this is not an iPhone 6. This is the original iPhone. And there's a reason for that. It's because basically, since this phone right here, all other phones, including Samsung, have been derivatives of this design. Apple, when they introduced this phone, set a new bar. They had a new bar in terms of user experience for a digital device, a telephone, a new bar in terms of complexity. This thing is incredibly complex, and if you talk to some of the folks involved in the product development of this, they were absolutely terrified that this product would fail. When Steve Jobs introduced it, they had no idea whether it would work correctly or not for that introduction. And then the business model behind it was brilliant as well, and they're all integrated. And none of them could have been successful without feeding off of each other. So again, if we go to this Venn diagram, you can see that those same features that we love, that captivating user experience, that beautiful form, the simplicity of the design, the system complexity, Gorilla Glass, iTunes, apps, the launch through AT&T, all of it was because of an integrated team that was operating at a very high, very stressed out level. And that's the nature of the beast. I mean, this is not, as most of you know, product development, product creation. It's a contact sport. You get bumped and bruised, and sometimes, you know, you just get nailed. These guys were getting beat around pretty badly. Gorilla Glass is a story in of itself. I mean, that was a technology or a material that Corning had already sort of had on a shelf. Steve Jobs called up the CEO of Corning and asked them if they could help create this, you know, very durable substrate for the face of this phone. And they said, no, it's too scary for us. This is just too out there. And only until, so Steve Jobs, I believe, got a series of no's from the CEO, and only until he flew to Corning, New York, and cornered him in the hallway, did Steve and the CEO come to an agreement that they would that Corning would develop Gorilla Glass. Gorilla Glass now is used in many billions of phones worldwide. And it's just amazing how, to me, how a CEO of a company was unwilling to take a little risk for an opportunity that became so large. And of course, some of that comes to foresight, and but also a lot of it has to do with risk tolerance, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Now, that Venn diagram that I've drawn has been sort of equal design, engineering, and business, but certain products, they really need a different emphasis. So, for example, shoes, Reebok, Nike, Adidas, designing shoes, bags, soft goods, Alessi, you know, doing basically housewares, or Tumi doing bags. These are all product categories where there's not a lot of engineering uncertainty, and it's really about creating a new emotional connection with a customer and generating business. And it would be a huge mistake for a company like Reebok to beef up its engineering staff when most of that's done by a factory that's producing the shoes, and their customers are expecting a beautiful design. That would be a misplace of resources. So, you know, I drew this new Venn diagram to kind of illustrate that you need to customize this. You need to have some strategy to how you design your business or how you design your product development team before you start designing your product. And so I'll go through a couple more. You know, with the Land Rover, I put this in more of an engineering biased team. Now you may say, why is that? Because when you look at the Land Rover, that's a Defender 90. It's pretty much the same aesthetic or vocabulary, visual vocabulary, as the original Land Rover, which was invented in 1948. And how did that come to be? I mean, we're very Most people see that truck and they go, oh my God, that thing is fantastic. It is beautiful. It resonates with me. And why is that? Because I can tell you this, there is not a lot of design involved in the creation of that vehicle. It happened during World War II. A lot of the things about this vehicle that were brilliant, for example, the use of Burma-Bright, which is an aluminum alloy in the body, was not a choice by the designers or the engineering team. It was because steel wasn't available. So what did they do? They said, okay, well, what else can we make it out of? I mean, they could have selected wood for all we know, but luckily they went Burma-Bright because this is now a body that doesn't corrode. And so that's one of the contributing factors to making this what I think has an amazing fact, which is 85% of every Land Rover, Defender, or series vehicle made is still in service since that time period. So it's a testament to how good design can resonate to such a degree that people really take care of their products and maintain them. And I think it's also, just as a sidebar, and this is probably a topic for a whole nother talk, but it's also another strategy for perhaps how we can eliminate waste in our consumption of material items right now. And I think as designers, if we do a great job, that waste stream can be reduced dramatically. There's more to that story, but we only have another 40 minutes, so I'll move along. So here are a couple other companies, PayPal, Airbnb, Uber. You know, these are products that were basically designed and created, but they didn't require a whole lot of industrial design. It was really about a business prototype, a new business paradigm. However, Airbnb actually was founded by a couple of past students of mine, and they're designers. And everything about that company is high design. It's beautiful. The experience is beautiful. It's incredibly thoughtful. They spend an amazing amount of time evaluating and critiquing and doing design reviews about how to improve the user experience for that company. And as a result, they're going to be really safe. Now, you look at PayPal, for example. Now, PayPal, you know, they put a big emphasis on business viability. There's a lot of engineering behind it in terms of the financial instruments and the web technology to make that happen. But what if somebody were to put a greater emphasis on design in a product like that? What would happen to PayPal? What if you provided the same functionality that PayPal has, the same business upside, but all of a sudden the user experience was delightful? So that's a question that if you're in business, you need to ask all the time, because it's a really easy way to get your lunch stolen. And if you're on top of this, you can constantly modify and improve your product so that you prevent a competitive kind of threat like that. And part of doing these Venn diagrams helps you model where your weakness and strengths may be. All right, so let's talk about process a little bit. This is your typical kind of design process, heavily simplified. You start usually by doing some research. That can be research into users, it can be into the market, it could be into analogous products, it can be competitors, it can be technologies, it can be intellectual property. And you compile all this stuff, and it's usually done by a team, let's say a marketing team, okay? And then that is sort of disseminated to the engineers and designers, and everyone kind of generates some concepts, and then you test. Here's another embodiment of that, where it shows more of the iterations involved. So now if you move from left to right, where you begin and you're sort of flowing through the spiral, the spiral is very wide at the beginning. You're covering a lot of ground. And this is where you want the quality of your iterations to be very low. Otherwise, you can't cover all that ground as fast. You're moving too slow. You'll never move down to that sort of time and quality line. But as you do, the spirals get closer together, and you're moving faster and faster, and the amount of places that you're exploring is narrowing, and you're starting to spend more time implementing than kind of failing. And as you're doing this, you're doing research, you're generating concepts, and then you're getting feedback, and you're repeating that over and over and over again. And this, is also represented here in this slide as silos doing this. So that whole process would be performed by engineering, and they'll do that for technology. They'll look at, if they're doing a specific product, let's say they're moving fluids, they'll be looking at all kinds of, peristaltic pumps and what kind of tubing to use, and, they'll be looking at flow rates and diameters and orifices and check valves, and they'll be trying to compile, get a lay of the land. And then they'll build a prototype, build a technology perhaps, and then they'll test it. Design, they'll do the same thing, but they'll be basically focusing on the user experience. So how does it look? How does it feel? What's the ergonomics? They're going to go out, they're going to talk to the user. They might talk to the customer. They're going to talk to the stakeholders. They might find stakeholders that no one had thought of. And then they're going to iterate as well. They're going to build, test, iterate. Business, same thing. They're going to go and do their market research. They're going to start thinking about how they're going to sell this product. They might put together a business model or a cash flow projection or something of that nature. And they'll do these in silos, and then every now and then they'll get together and have a meeting. And they will basically dump all kinds of data on each other and expect everyone to take this fire hose of information and swallow it. And then you add on top of that credibility, and which I don't think is talked about enough. But when you're a designer and you've got someone in marketing telling you what the user wants, you're instantly saying, I don't think I believe them because I talked to the user. And vice versa. If the designer tells marketing, hey, I had this really great insight talking to a user the other day, marketing's going to be like, well, our data suggests blah, blah, blah. So this can cause these silos really create some significant issues. Bandwidth in terms of communication, credibility in terms of the information. And so it's really a much better approach to integrate these teams. And, in a small organization, you could just take the whole group and integrate them. And then you would take this integrated team and you would have them all do the research. You would have the engineers go meet the users with the designers and the business folks. And you would all do market research together, and you would all do technology research. And as a result, what happens is that you're now communicating more like a trickle feed. You're trickle charging. And that massive data dump never has to occur. And furthermore, the actual communication between each other is far more detailed. You get far more information. Because it's a sort of, actually, now I think about it, it is like charging a battery. You just get a better charge when you trickle charge a battery as opposed to hot charging one. So we're a little bit like that. And so in a small group or startup, you can do this all together. You have credibility because you all shared in the experience of hearing, let's say, the customer's voice. And now you have consensus right from the get-go. There's not this long meeting of argumentation and trying to build consensus. The consensus is there. You also all start to use the customer and the customer's voice as your decision maker, as opposed to the strong opinions of the extroverts in the group. That's a very powerful mistake to avoid with this. Now, in a larger organization, I'm sure some of you are saying, yeah, well, that's ridiculous. There's no way we can do that here at, Boeing. But what you could do is you could create what I would call an integrated design leadership team. And that would be taking 2 or 3 people from the key disciplines that are necessary to make your product, to produce your product, or design your product. And you're going to basically use them, just like I described here, to go build that consensus and create a design vision that they will go back to their silos and disseminate. And because they're of the same flock in their silos, the credibility issue becomes less of an issue. So let's go back to this process, this very simplified version of the process again. Research, generate concepts, test. Well, what are the objectives of these things? So for research, it's develop empathy. That's basically what you want to do. You want the team to feel the pain of your customers and your stakeholders. You want them to feel the ups, the downs, the love, the joy, the frustration, the hatred related to your product, because it's out there and you need to find it. Then, once you've done all that, you're going to generate concepts. And basically, when you generate your concepts, your main objective should be to maximize your creativity. Anybody can hedge, and you're probably going to hedge. Question is, what's your starting point when you hedge? If you're really out there, if you've got something really fantastic and really new and different, you can always hedge. You can always modify that or modulate it to the point that it's feasible. But if your starting point's really far out, you're going to be much more likely to have a paradigm-changing product. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. And then testing. What is testing? Well, really, it's learning from failure. So we're going to talk about that a little bit and sort of the problems we have with failure, given the society that we live in and the conditioning that we've experienced from childhood. And so here are some methods to do these things. So developing empathy, I'm sure many of you are familiar with these, but doing interviews one-on-one, observing people using your product or an analogous product. And when you do that, connecting with those people, really, just basically becoming friends. We'll talk about image boards. Next, maximizing creativity. Well, let's push the limits. I just talked about that. Don't settle. That's a big problem. People are, you can get tired. You can get scared. You can be worried that you're going to look bad, Well, don't settle. Don't just go for broke. And then, make it fun. If it's not fun for you, it's not going to be fun for your customers. I can promise you that. Embracing failure. Start to equate failure with progress. The faster you fail, the more it hurts when you fail, the more embarrassing that failure, I guarantee you, the more progress you're making, the more you're learning, and you're learning it deep. It's not just an intellectual lesson. It's a spiritual lesson. And that's something that will also translate to your products. View your team as family. That it should be a safe, supportive, argumentative, sassy environment where no one feels that they are above anyone else, yet everyone loves everyone else, and make sure that everyone is respected and appreciated. And then try to do this all in a creative or stimulating environment. And we're going to talk about all these right now, starting with developing empathy. So, interviews. These are some students at RISD, and they were interviewing one of the people here for their product development project. And, in this case, I suggested that there be two people to sort of do the interview and one person as the respondent or the interviewee. And that's simply so one person can have a conversation and the other person can take notes. It's very important in interviews, I have found, to make these actually a conversation, as if you're developing a friendship. If you come with a set schedule of questions it becomes mechanical. And you get a very superfluous kind of mechanical response. And you get a mechanical insight. And it's shallow. What you really want to do is get into these people's lives and understand what I said earlier. What makes them tick? What do they love? What do they hate? What do they want to do? What do they love in life? You know, what do they value? And then start to understand how your product matches to that. So it's not so much about, hey, do you think this button is large enough? You know, great, wonderful. You can do that later on, you know, when you've got something to show. But don't try to get that up front now. Try to get something that's really going to satisfy, you know, satisfy their emotional needs. And then map it all out. As you see, they're doing that on the desk. Here's a project I was working on. It was a product for the U.S. Army, and I feel very passionately about what I'm speaking. And I told the Army, I don't know what it is to be a soldier. I have no clue. And if I'm going to design a product for them, it's my responsibility to do a good job for them. And to do a good job, I need to meet them, talk with them, spend some time with them, maybe even pretend to be one for a little bit. And to my shock, they said, what a great idea. And they sent me down to Fort Polk and put me on a 9-man squad in a live fire exercise for a couple of days. And it was incredibly revealing who soldiers are. They are not Rambo. They don't roam around, you know, with enormous guns and tattoos and work out all the time. I'm sure some do. But the guys that I was with were basically 18-year-old kids, in my opinion. And when I showed up here at the cache, they were reading gaming magazines and comic books. I was just blown away. Couldn't believe it. And I left with a very deep level of appreciation of who these folks are. And now when we lose soldiers in some far-off place, I have a different perception of what that means and who those people are. And it affected everything I did from this point on and how I designed products for them. So you got to connect. Observation is also an incredibly powerful tool in developing empathy and also discovering things like latent needs. So latent needs, that's a term that we use that describes needs that people aren't really aware of. They haven't become aware of them, and if they're not aware of them, it's very difficult for them to express those needs. So you can't find out what those needs are in an interview or a survey. But if you go and watch and you notice that this guy keeps fiddling with his antenna that's going out the window there. So in this case, you can see the guy on the radio. That antenna never stayed put. Well, he never complained about it, but that's an opportunity. You know, if you're in the antenna business, let's say, you could go and you could create an antenna that, you know, deploys incredibly easily, and it's incredibly stable and has all the other existing performance, hits all the other existing performance metrics. So again, observation to me is really one of my most favorite things to do. You might also find out that soldiers sleep in the middle of the day, like I did here. It was 3 o'clock, and I was just, again, blown away with I thought it was all very disciplined and regimented, and everybody had a job to do, and you all, are lined up, and it's just not true. And so it changed again how I designed the product for these folks. If you can, we're not going to go into this, but this is probably the one analytical thing I'll talk about here. If you can capture the needs as raw need statements and then translate them into a needs list where the statements are a platform for creativity, that is a very powerful tool. And I suggest that everyone, once they create a needs list and do a good job at it, tattoo this on their body somewhere, because it's something you'll refer to through the entire project. These will eventually get translated into specifications or selection criteria. So it's a very powerful tool. If you want to explore this, I highly recommend the book Product Design and Development that's written by Carl Ulrich and Steve Eppinger. and it explains all the things I'm not in this presentation. It's just an amazing book, and there's something in there for everyone, no matter what level of sophistication you're at in product development. So, oops, I didn't want to show this yet, but let's go back. So let's say I said to you, I'd like to design a lamp, and I'd love it to be organic in nature. You know, I'd love it to look, I'd like to have lots of compound curves, really sensual and fluid, and I'd love it to have, you know, like a smooth texture and just really, you know, kind of fresh, and you see it, you just feel invigorated. And I said that in a meeting under fluorescent lights with gray walls and a clock, digital clock, which is what I'm looking at right now. No one would leave that meeting with those words in their mind. No one. So the image board was invented probably a really long time ago. And this is one. I just grabbed this, and this is something that, with a few images, communicates 1,000 words. And you can pin this up in your workspace, and it's kind of nice to look at, so it's worth pinning up anyway. But it also keeps everyone on task or in the same direction or sharing the same vision in terms of a feeling and an emotion. Image boards are really good at communicating complicated emotions, something that words are not so good at. And they're, you know, if you haven't illustrated it yet, you know, with your incredibly talented design team, it's a real quick way to kind of get some sort of vision. Here's another one, and in this case, you know, I don't know what this was for. I'll let you look at that for a second, and you can be the judge. But it definitely communicates a genre or an aesthetic or a lifestyle, perhaps, that this product has to fit into. So let's talk about maximizing creativity. So pushing the limits. Here's a team, again, at RISD. Designers push the limits real well. They kind of do that naturally. And, you know, in this case, they were designing a desk, a new desk for a major hotel chain. And so in this case, they had come up with a whole bunch of scale models. You can kind of see them there. And they ranged the gamut from, you know, desks that nested into other pieces of furniture to save space, to desks that had embedded LEDs and light shows in them, to desks that were just a big OLED screen that would kind of pull up images of your family and make you feel at home, or maybe images of your view out your window at home. And they also had, you know, cantilever designs, and just, you know, basically just craziness. It's just crazy, fantastic, wild stuff, you know. Willy Wonka, you know, would have been proud. And from there, you start getting real. But the starting point was so far out that by the time they brought it down to something that was feasible, it was still a phenomenal project and a great result. Iteration is key, and how you iterate is very important. So in this case, we're trying to figure out the right size for a product to fit a human forearm. And of course, there's, you know, 5th percentile women to 95th percentile man, and we need to make sure that we understand what those are. Now, you can easily go to a book, you know, like The Measure of Man and Woman by Henry Dreyfuss Associates, and another great book that anyone designing products for humans should have in their library. And you can look up those dimensions. But what does that mean? Not a lot. So what we did is we wanted to really kind of validate that our hypothesis about size was correct for this thing. And the quickest way to do that would be to make a bunch of quick prototypes and just test them on forearms. And so that's what we did. And we just, in Illustrator, drew a 2-dimensional template, printed it out on a laser printer in various sizes, put them onto some rigid foam insulation, and cut this out in our bandsaw. And went and started meeting people, and we were able to get really hard data on exactly what the sizing should be. Nothing ambiguous about this. And all it took was about 3 hours of time. Now, you could try to do this quicker, but think about the uncertainty you'd have throughout the rest of the process. Or you might say, well, I'm going to CAD that up. Well, by the time you start your CAD program and, I don't know, model, a little bit, I could probably have all of these knocked out. So it's really about looking at the cost-benefit of various processes and always making an intelligent decision about that. Don't just do what you like to do. Do what makes sense for the project. Because efficiency equals quality. Because you can just do more in the same amount of time. Here's another way to explore. Again, no CAD was used in the creation of these renderings. And these are just done in Illustrator. And from here, you pick a design direction. And then you might do 10 more iterations of one of these designs. And then you'll start thinking, okay, now it's time to build a prototype. And now you CAD it up and start investing in the time in that CAD model. Exploration and doing it, again, in a very efficient way is how you make sure that you cover all the possibilities that are out there. And again, if you don't do it, your competitors might. So if you don't feel like doing it because you're not into it, just think about the potential downside if you're not interested in the upside. This happened last week. One of my teams, they're working on, is at RISD, they're working on a digital physical game. And this is one of their prototypes. And they just made all these parts out of Lego and cards and, colored paper and stuff. And they had their iPhones or there's a Android there, I think, or something, Samsung. And this is 7 weeks into the semester. Believe me, there's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on this one. But they arrived at this concept that I saw them start the game. This is what they looked like at the start. By the end of the class, there were 12 people around these guys, and they were yelling and hooting and hollering and laughing, and we got in trouble by the other studios and instructors for making too much noise. It was just an incredibly successful concept. But the reason I bring that up is that I mentioned that I got in trouble. That's something else you need to get comfortable with. I'm in trouble all the time. And most of the people at this table are mad at me for something. But they get over it sooner or later. And the end result is usually something that everyone is so proud of. And the experience of doing that together becomes this, a product unto itself that transcends everything. All right, so embracing failure. Running out of time. So here's how you can look at failure. Well, first of all, the design process is really just sort of a structured bunch of failures. When you go to design something, you are basically trying to find something in this very murky environment. So in this case, I had these like little rice paddy pools. They're full of this kind of murky water. And if you imagine that there's a solution in there somewhere, how do you find it? Well, you just got to jump in there and you feel around. And you're going to get wet. It might get cold out. The water could be, hot and some days, cold and others. And, it's not real comfortable, but you just hold your breath, close your eyes, and you just keep feeling around. And you start to learn the topology of the bottom of these pools, and you become familiar with it. And eventually you start to realize the best possible solution and where it's located. So that's basically trial and error. And it's in this very murky environment. And most of us, especially in new product design and development, that's what it's like. It's just an incredible amount of uncertainties. And so managing those uncertainties is critical. And you have to be very comfortable hunting around in murky waters. Designers are really good at this. Art students are really good at this because their whole lives have been based around exploring murky kind of things like emotions or things that they see that no one else sees and trying to communicate that to other people. And so they hunt and peck and they just keep trying and they iterate. This is called design thinking. And that's what everybody's talking about. And there's some wonderful stuff out there, you know, at other institutions around the planet that are doing this. Most of them are not, they're doing it in a workshop or a 6-week event of some sort. And we believe here that it's really worth doing this over a very significant amount of time. And that's why integrated design and management was invented. It was really to grant a degree to people who have done a very substantive thing in this field. More failure. I mean, would you think you have to go through all this to design a chair? I mean, it's basically a seat pan, a seat back, and some legs. But no, to get it right, to get it to feel just right, to hit that lumbar region just right, to have it look beautiful, to have it conform and kind of bring you into it and make you feel safe and cuddled, it takes time and energy. And it's not like chairs are new, right? I mean, it's not exactly a new product. But yet, this is what it took to come up with a beautiful chair design in this chair studio at RISD. It's all part of that process, iterating, managing failure. And then the other thing I like to talk about is finding limits. Remember, you don't know where your limits are until you cross them. So that means you are going to crash at some point. You are going to pay for that. But if you're strategic about it, what you pay for is a lot less than if you're not strategic about it. So try to engineer those failures. Try to design that process so that your failures are done in a way that doesn't cost you a whole lot and that you learn the most from them. But by all means, cross that line as much as you can so that you know that you have unturned every stone. Team, very important. This is another student team. When you work on a team, you know, you all speak different languages, whether it's the language of engineering, language of business, or the language of design. Try to learn each other's languages, and if possible, you know, become trilingual. And then as a person who's proficient in a given language, try to, you know, reduce the number of acronyms, try to reduce the amount of jargon. You really want to communicate, right? It's not about beating someone up or getting your way. It's about finding the truth, creating the best product you can, and that means making sure that everyone is included and engaged as a team member. And then appreciate each other. This is a very high priority. I don't think it needs explanation. Introverts. I'm an introvert. I broke free of my introverted nature. It was very painful, but you got to speak up. You have to do it. And by practicing, you will become comfortable. And extroverts, encourage the introverts. And also extroverts, don't talk so much. And respect each other's time. You know, efficiency, as I mentioned before, is paramount to quality. So try not to send emails that took you 3 seconds to write, but it's going to cost someone half an hour to answer. Be sensible. And then reach for something great, because there's just no point in doing any of this if you're not reaching for something great. Okay. And then the environment is very critical. And if you can co-locate your integrated team, you're going to do a really great job in communicating and being creative and supporting each other. You'll be able to do design reviews where you can share what you've learned and where you're at with a greater audience. So that environment is key. So here's some checklists for you. I'll just go through these really quickly. These slides will be available online after the session, and you can just refer to them at your leisure. Most of these things we've talked about. Let me just look at this. Okay, talked about all those. Here's your checklist for a good team. Make sure you have a team that includes all the disciplines necessary to produce this product. So if you need an anthropologist, bring them in. If you need a chemical engineer, bring them in. You know, don't just do what I'm suggesting, business, design, and engineering. You know, get specific. Make sure the whole team participates in all the phases. You know, it sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how difficult that is for a company that already has an entrenched culture about how to do stuff. You need to, this is where crossing the limits and, getting in trouble is necessary. You will not affect change without those uncomfortable moments. And then your culture, your environment. Make sure you can all work in a space. Here's a space at RISD. This is from a design studio. Look at it. I mean, by most people's standards, it's a disaster. By my standards, it's perfect. This is what you want. You want constant creativity and the ability to create at whim. Make sure the team has a passionate vision, and make sure you're ready to fail. IDM is our new program. We will have an integrated student body that's represented by those 3 disciplines. We're going to have integrated faculty also from those 3 disciplines. We're completely committed to all 3 disciplines in a really big way. We'll have integrated curriculum, lectures on all these things and how they work together, and the whole track will take place in an immersive action-based environment. So thank you, and I believe we're going to open up for questions.
Thanks, Matt. We have a number of questions that have come in on the chat feature, and I do encourage you, if you have additional questions, feel free to go ahead and use that. The first question that we have came in from a user who said, with regards to interviews in design, isn't there a danger of perceptual data misleading the designer?
By perceptual data, I guess I'd love clarity on that, but I will just assume that what it means is that the kind of intent or motives of the designer or the design team are kind of tainting the information. And the real answer to that is that, yeah, you got to be aware of that, and hopefully you're going to do more than one interview. We recommend that you do 10 to 15, maybe even 20 interviews, and what's going to happen is the information is going to aggregate over those interviews, and you're going to start seeing patterns emerge. It goes. I thought it would kind of go without saying that the frequency of a given piece of data across your respondents is going to also determine its validity and hierarchy in the needs finding process. I hope that answers your question.
Next question we have is, in today's world of internet and connectivity, where customers want product in less time with increased quality, how should big organizations go around integrating the core elements of design, engineering, and business to get to this product in less time? What are the key areas that should be considered?
So I think, one of the key things is if you can create, I don't know how large cultures feel about this term, but, a skunk works team. And the danger with those is that anyone who's not on it feels excluded. But if you can do that in a way that's inclusive, or perhaps you have a rotating, participant list of skunk work teams, that would probably allow for a more lean and nimble group of individuals to move through the process very, very quickly. Having said that, and I think many people would disagree with me on this, but I am a proponent of actually delaying a product launch if it means improved quality. Now, I feel that way mostly because of my kind of environmental outlooks, because I feel that if we're not putting out the highest quality product, it's more likely to be discarded in a sooner period of time. And so I'm very, very conscious about that. You can balance those trade-offs as needed.
Thanks, Matt. The next question is, how can these concepts be applied to the design of workflows for specific work? I work in an ambulatory healthcare and consider workflows as a product that needs to meet the parameters of design, engineering, and cost. Is that a reasonable assumption? And if so, are there limits to the application of product design principles to workflow design?
Nope. That's a wonderful question because, it brings me, to talk about a point that I had forgotten, which is that this process that we've talked about today can not only create tangible products, but it can also create solutions to societal needs or systematic problems that we're facing. So I highly encourage you to use this process to, for example, let's say that we're trying to solve the problem of, I don't know, some problem that an inner city child has. If you simply go out and meet that child or other children like that, and you become connected to them, and you define that problem with incredible accuracy and fidelity, you are very likely to create concepts that will solve that problem. I think right now in our society, with our political leaders, we are not using a process that solves our problems in a meaningful way. We tend to just throw money at stuff, and everybody hates that. So thanks for asking that one.
So the next one comes in. During the failure and learning time while undergoing testing, how do you convince top management and decision makers to continue with enthusiasm and intensity without sidelining the product? How do you convince that iteration takes time and patience?
Okay, so that's why we've invented integrated design and management, because we hope to create those new business leaders. Does that answer your question? You can read between the lines. That's really hard to do. It's very, very hard. One thing you can do is you can try to expose your leaders to these concepts through various experts. Send them to Stanford, to D-School for a workshop. Send them here to come talk to us, have them start reading Fast Company, or At Issue is a great publication. Really kind of opening their eyes is part of the process. And maybe if you can present to them an idea that is, you've engineered an idea or designed an experiment on process where you have eliminated risk. So maybe it's something that's like an exercise, and then invite them to participate, because if they don't see the process unfold in front of them, it will not resonate with them. You can't go back to them and say, hey, the experiment worked. Okay, that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, when you just can't have marketing come to the designers and say, hey, by the way, we figured it out. Nobody will believe you. So try to have those leaders participate.
So a similar question to the workflow question is a question that comes in large-scale design. How do you apply these ideas to an environment where you're building a large single product like an aerospace or space application?
I have no idea. Next question.
How do you navigate?
Thank you.
How do you navigate an environment where two silos are generally very interactive, but one is quite separate? For example, business decisions are made and handed down to engineers and designers who work together.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to prevent. That's exactly the kind of corporate culture or process or kind of decision-making process or decision tree that I think is really problematic. And when it's coming down from the leaders, again, I think that kind of goes back to the answer I gave a moment ago, where maybe you go to your leaders with big sparkling eyes and an idea for an experiment. You could call it a boot camp or something of that nature, or an offsite, but make sure they come if you can, and have them go through sort of an epic design experience that has some tangible results, and pick a low-hanging fruit so that when you're done, there's some sort of result that leader can go back and, is sitting around on the weekend going, holy mackerel, that kicked butt. That was awesome. We need more of that. It's just a matter of exposure. It's a matter of giving them a taste. That's what it's about. So if you can figure out a way to slip the pill in, you'll probably get some traction.
So I have one last question. I have several more questions. I've got one more that I can take in the time that we've got, and I think it's important for the way SCM and IDM are coming together. The question is, how is integrated design different than system design?
Okay, so they're very, very similar. The real difference, so in terms of pedagogy, the difference is that integrated design and management is really focusing on products and concepts that will be that the result will interface with humans, okay? And in system design and management, the result or the products that come out of system SDM may not ever see a human. It may be a complex system that, you know, propels a nuclear submarine. It could be, you know, how to create a air traffic control system or something of that nature. With IDM, the products and results are all going to probably be dealing with directly with humans. There'll be human experience. There'll be an interface. So that's one big, probably the biggest difference. They both deal with system. They both deal with process. You know, products are systems. The other sort of pedagogical difference is that integrated design and management will take place in a design studio as opposed to lecture halls. So that's sort of another big difference.
Matt, we've got 1 o'clock, and I'd like to respect our listeners' time constraints, although we have a couple other questions. If you're willing to hang around for a few minutes afterwards, we could go through those.
Sure.
But what I'd like to say for those that need to leave us now, I want to thank you for joining us for the SDM webinar series today. If you're interested in learning more about the IDM Master's Program track that Matt's leading here at MIT, please plan to join us on Thursday, November 19th at noontime for a virtual information session on IDM. There'll also be a virtual information session on the SDM Master's Program track on Thursday, December 4th at noontime. Please see the website sdm.mit.edu for more details, and that'll also link you over to the IDM website. And you can see on the screen there as well, Matt has the IDM website up, idm.mit.edu. In terms of our regular webinar series, on November 17th, we'll be hosting a webinar on workflows in healthcare. I'm going to give about 2 more questions to Matt, and then again, I'm going to respect everybody's time, but I'd like to thank you for joining us. Let me just pull up, we have a couple of additional questions here. So I'm scanning back up. Give me half a second, this is live on time. There's a question here, it says, a number of books mentioned during the talk, can a reference slide be added to the slide package? And the answer to that is yes, we'll make sure that we tag on a reference slide.
Terrific.
The next question is, I'm working on the design of mass market insurance. One second, I'm just having a little bit of trouble with it. Products for the bottom of the pyramid in Africa. How do you gather and test design concepts for financial products where consumer awareness may not exist about the need? How do you, I think the question in other words is, how do you test for something where people don't know they need something? Yep,
that's a great question. So so you need to kind of create a placebo concept or two. And you would then take those concepts to Africa and show them to folks, to show them what you're thinking and see what people feel and how they respond. You may completely redesign those concepts. I mean, the idea is to really sort of tease out information and not to sell those concepts. But you need a starting point, and so that might be how you start, and then you come back and you then enter the design process in a huge way and, you know, do a really big concept generation phase. And then while you're there, of course, don't forget to ask them about their lives and, you know, their kind of futures for themselves and all their values so that you can align your product to those things.
Matt, thank you very much for joining us today, and we're very much looking forward to the launch of the new track. And again, please, if you are interested in learning more about IDM, join us on Thursday, November 19th at noon for another live webinar. It's actually a virtual information session that'll go through more details on the IDM program. Thank you very much.
Thank you.